Okay.
PhD. And then now she's
Whenever.
she's she comes. I would like to yeah.
Natalia mentioned that they have trouble with the flies and the water. If people are the same flies. Maybe he thinks it's next week.
No, my girl is very short.
Time to rest the room. It takes a little bit of logistically.
It's rain.
It's raining now.
We have 200 over 200 resilience of water supply, which runs all over the coast. Hello, yo voy a hablar la
Which one? So this one?
Just show something.
No, they want
Yes, show you something. We had like this was putting together highlight solution for collaboration. I was also
I don't see yours.
here is district. District office.
Okay, so we have this, then we missed one.
Early. You
So
also
what happened to mine? I think you should copy that. It should be indexed. We go to the.
So you got all the what you yes.
They were very skeptical.
Yeah, yeah, but this one.
The same, that's what we.
Okay.
You show it the desktop. Copy the desktop.
Okay.
Check that. Oh, you just the, yeah. Well, you know, when we coach you, what happened, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Everything good?
I think you're third day.
Those places where we were and I'm very sure very, very good. Even also guys didn't have to. Oh, we have the director of the we have the branch director of the water quality branch. We have the researchers. We have the architects from Texas who works with green infrastructure, she's certified. Very, very good. I would like to meet Rafael Rodriguez.
Hi.
He's a professor in the engineering department. They've been working with the energy parks, talking about so many other things.
Eleanor runs the university program at DHS.
Thank you so very much. Wonderful.
People, she's actually got
Yeah.
Sí, ajá. No te di clase. Ah, ok. Claro, entonces. Está bien, está bien. Eso es acá en Nueva York. Sí, sí. Allí empezó John Wallace. Sí, pero ahora está en entrega con teléfono, paredes. Sí, mucho. ¿En qué no hiciste el doctorado? Viendo, ¿con qué? Con Ford. Ok. Ese era compañero sí. No sé. Creo que ya me va a
No, I think we were wrong.
Sí, no, él se estaba todo el año ese que tuvo.
Trabajo con el
Yes, and I'm Noah. So we are colors.
I used to be at Noah, which is why when I saw your name and she told me that, I was like, name from something other than this. Yeah.
It's like, no, no, we'll see. I'm gonna have a hard time tonight on fundraisers because I'm gonna want to talk about things that I did.
So I was gonna say, when I saw you on the elevator last time and today, you looked familiar. And so, I mean, I mentioned was Kathy worked with me, but, so where were you at Noah?
I came in as a Margaret Dates opinion.
Uh-huh, very good.
In class, we're all still with it.
And I was in fishery science and technology, and as well as, doing integrated systems. That's how we know each other. We didn't even know we were both here.
I started type of all New York City. So that's what started. I was at a council, I got a master's and PhD. 6 months into my PhD at Delaware, my advisor got me down to tenure. And then we have our discussion, I was the first council.
So you were in England, because I was a conductor. Okay, so maybe.
What era? The office.
There's so many, many issues.
Humor and others that were very much.
It's basic foundations that we have.
And I was gonna say,
That's one of the issues that comes after.
Okay.
We're just organization.
And then I went to Norway, and that was where I started. There, Dr. Cheryl, Margaret. It's not like that.
The first time I ever saw her speak was probably in the early 2000s. Yes, because she was.
Welcome to this session. This is Engineering and Coastal Resiliency, a national and international imperative infrastructure challenge facing our islanded communities. So this is start from 2:15. We have 3 panelists here today. If you look at the agenda, then we have 1 panelist who cannot make it up today. So we have 3. Okay. Our first speaker is Professor Jorge. I'm trying to learn your name. Gonzalez. He's the director of the Hispanic Alliance for the Graduate Education and the Professorate on Environmental Sciences and Engineering of the CUNY Initiative to Promote Academic Success in STEM, lead scientist of the Coastal Urban Environmental Research Group, the CUNY's presidential professor and NOAA Crest Professor of Mechanical Engineering at the City College of New York. It's a long list of titles, just making short here, just because it's important. So Professor Gonzalez earned his doctor's degree in 1994 from Georgia Tech, and then bachelor's in 1988 from University of Puerto Rico, in the US. So he joined the City College of New York in 2008. After 10 years at Santa Clara University, California, and professor and David Packard Scholar, and also chairman and professor of mechanical engineering at University of Puerto Rico. So Dr. Gonzalez's research expertise is urban energy sustainability, urban weather, climate, and remote sensing, regional climate modeling and analysis. There's lots of stuff there. So he has authored and co-authored more than 90 peer-reviewed publications and delivered more than 100 conference presentations, and his research funding has been phenomenal, more than $30 million. So let's welcome Dr. Gonzalez.
So it's going to be about 12, 15 minutes now.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Great, thank you, Professor Liang, and thank you everybody for joining this conference and the panel. And what I would like to try to do is to focus on the aspect of the power infrastructure and lessons from Puerto Rico to be in the context of the conference. And by any means, I'm an expert on power infrastructure. It just happened that some of our weather and climate modeling started to converge into the power infrastructure, and for that reason, I thought that we could focus on that, and also thinking about the questions about what we have learned, where we are heading to, and how the universities can support the way forward. So a quick fact of Puerto Rico, since I'm the first one of the panelists, the population actually has gone a little bit down from 3.4 million to 3.2 in part because of the catastrophic event of Hurricane Maria. So those are quick facts on the aspect of mountainous terrain will be important. When we focus back into the power infrastructure, this is a snapshot of the power grid of the island. And a few points from here is that a significant part of the generation occurs in the southern part of the island. That has been achieved over the past few decades from the most urban areas in San Juan. The other key aspect is that most of the generation still today, at least up to the point of this storm, to be mostly from conventional sources. And we also see the distribution, a large percentage on the residential side, as many places. So bringing that into the context of the mountainous terrain is important, because that impact was a key factor in the interaction with the catastrophic event of Hurricane Maria. And we can see that the Central Mountains up in the center part of the island. The eastern part has some high elevations altogether, which means that most of the power distribution has to cross across those mountainous terrain. And so it's not a trivial distribution system. It's actually quite complex. So a lot of text here, but it's important to be in the context that after 2+ years, we're still in the recovery process, and the recovery was the consequence of having a large population, percentage of the population, without that infrastructure, or at least the service of that infrastructure. So this clearly represents an opportunity for to learn, to better prepare, not only for the case of Puerto Rico, but also for other island communities, particularly in the tropics, in the context of this mountainous terrain. The catastrophic event impacted many aspects of the society of the island, but particularly the power infrastructure was a key component that was almost 90+% destroyed. And there was no single component that was not affected. Perhaps the key generation, the major generators were not affected, but the entire distribution system, and also some of the few renewable energy systems that have been deployed over the island. This is a probably most of all has seen this map. This is in this particular case from my colleague from NYU, Masoud Gandehari, who will be here tomorrow, showing the evolution of the nightlights prior to the storm, which was 1 month before, and about 11 months after. So that gives a sense of the obscurity that the island was exposed. This is a very famous, now famous plot that shows that it took about a year to get to almost 90% of restored. A couple of other things important here is that Hurricane Maria was not an isolated event. It was actually preceded by another almost catastrophic event like Irma, where almost 50% of the island was without power. We have a very little time to recover before the next storm came in. So this is again from my colleague Masoud, and we see a very interesting distribution, spatial distribution of the number of months spent without significant amount of power in the island. We can see that it's skewed towards the eastern part of the island. So why was that, right? This is from the colleagues from the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, and this is again a snapshot of all the investment until not too long ago in the recovery, where the peak of the recovery occurred, most resources were spent, and now things are a little bit more stable. So the question is how we move forward from here. This is fresh from the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau. This was a discussion back in about 10 days ago, and where it's being released what they refer as the reimagining of the Puerto Rico electrical power infrastructure. And the key aspect of this is to segregate the power grid. So it's not as we currently have it. It's far more distributed, and that puts tremendous hopes and faith that distributed generation will increase resiliency in significant ways. So microgrids, wheeling is some way form of microgrids, because power generation can be at a remote place, or could be also then transacted at a different location. Also opening the markets for independent operators or energy cooperatives. All these has been approved. The energy cooperatives, I think, was approved about 2-3 weeks ago. So it's very recent. Things are moving on a real-time basis. So this is the projected integrated resource plan, as it referred in the island. Significant portion shift from conventional generation to renewables, on-site generation to a large degree. Again, in motivating flexibility in the grid by the microgrids, and also diversifying the sources of generation altogether, with a big emphasis on the renewables. So I consider these plans ambitious to a large degree, and this is an opportunity perhaps for the university and the commission to support. This is the latest vision of the potential likely microgrids that the system will be break it down. So a fundamental question is, will this distributed generation will increase resiliency under Maria-like events or other type of events? And part of the key aspect of the microgrids concept is that it's somehow connected to the critical infrastructure as well that was affected once the anchor of the infrastructure, the power, was disrupted. So these are the aspirations as of now of the island, and this is where I believe that university can support, is to bring in-depth analysis to support such potential solutions. At the same time, the local stakeholders cannot just wait, right? So there must be some action forward, and things are actually moving at a fast rate. The first microgrid is about to be at least approved in paper for the central part of the island, which was the most affected. They lasted about 9 months to be the power to be restored. It's a consortium of 5 municipalities, and the hopes in there is to combine solar, hydro, and storage all together. A very expensive approach. It's going to be about $10 million per megawatt. So those are opportunities for the academic sector to bring some talent and resources that are just impossible for the local stakeholders to have, because of time, is of essence, and because of other factors. So I'm going to touch base in a few of these elements from my experience and some of the other colleagues. And one key aspect that academia could do, jointly with some other resources such as national, is to really understand the curve of resiliency and recovery in the context of the different components of the infrastructure. How the system absorbs the shock, how quickly it will be recovered, and what will be the long-term plan for a highest level of resiliency. This is from Eric Walgreen and Sandia Lab, for example. So we just recently have a project, a $2 million project funded by the National Science Foundation and in collaboration precisely with the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau and some of the other resources, mostly funded by the NSF. And these are the schools that are collaborating in this project. And I will talk a little bit about that for only a few minutes. So these are the research questions that we're trying to address, how these socioeconomic stability, governance, and the baseline condition of infrastructure impact the performance and resilience of critical interdependent infrastructure systems, particularly the power in regard. And what knowledge can we develop to help guide these strategies that the stakeholders are suggesting for enhanced resiliency in our island communities under catastrophic events such as H. Maria? So one key question is that we need to dig into is why Hurricane Maria happened? Why this particular storm? What's the physics behind this? We call this replication of the natural event. And then we look into the consequence of that natural event into the power infrastructure. So this map shows the natural conditions that led to Hurricane Maria, and it was just a nice mix for catastrophe. Very low vertical wind shear at the time, very warm temperatures altogether. Those two key variables at least are just fuel for a very strong storm, right? So we can ask the question, had this condition happened in the past? How will this condition will happen in the future? And if so, how often will be there? And whether this condition will be impacted by larger signals such as climate change. So one key aspect, again, that academia could support is to fill the gaps. We actually have very little information on the details of the storm because there was no data at the time. So replication of the event is important. And also with accuracy, right? So this is the right path of the storm. So can we fill the gaps with our science since there were no measurements for the storm at the time. So this is some of the work that our team is doing in, again, replicating the event in a way that we can then solve some of the gaps. Then we can then ask some other questions about what was the impact of such a natural event into the power infrastructure. This is one key example that we're trying to explore, is to use artificial intelligence to forecast power outages. So there's a few other efforts out there across the nation in doing so, none of these for Puerto Rico, where we combine the actual infrastructure to the local variables such as topography, with the actual storm maximum winds at every location, and perhaps precipitation. We can add other variables, landslide, and so on. And can we understand then the risk that the infrastructure was exposed? And so then we can actually then anticipate what is likely to happen into the future. These are some of the initial results, at least it gives us a sense. Again, remember that map that showed the number of months without a high percentage of power shifted or tilted toward the east part of the island. Of course, that's where most of the strong winds occur. That's where most of the infrastructure was exposed. Still a lot of work to be done on this area, but there are some directions that perhaps universities using interdisciplinary approach can bring into. There's so many other questions. How is the critical infrastructure interconnected and how that can be impacted in cascading effects. What is the anchor that produces the largest cascading effects in some of the other infrastructure? It's an inventory of the critical infrastructure in the western part of the island. We're trying to understand how the power outages coupled to high winds, coupled to topography, impacted the rest of the infrastructure. Water services, communications, of course, and what it may take to restore. Again, using this case for Hurricane Maria, and Puerto Rico is not isolated in this need for knowledge. A key aspect is what's going to happen, what are the conditions for the future, what is the future power demand in the Caribbean, including Puerto Rico, due to population growth, due to changes in demographic, due to climate changes altogether. So academia can support these kind of fundamental questions, so that information can somehow inform some of the long-term recovery. Here, these are some projections of energy demands for the future on the different climate change scenarios. Some of the work that my group has been doing. I love the communities are very vulnerable. Puerto Rico is no isolated case. What we can learn from the island experience can be applicable to other places, even more populated. This is some of the work that we've been doing for New York. Our island communities, urban in the New York metro area, where we are then quantifying the assets of the power infrastructure and trying to determine the risk level in this region. This is part of what we call the New York City panel on climate change. So some of this work can be transferred in terms of the methodologies to other island communities, including Puerto Rico. This is some of the work from my colleagues from University of Connecticut and the Center for Eversource Energy Center, Professor Manos, that they are actually asking very similar questions, but in the case of the very